Welcome back, Metas. Today we are speaking about the MG4 Conflicting Memories. This is a light machine gun released with Way of Winter, and it's a shrapnel-based weapon. Now, like some of the other weapons released this scenario, there are multiple ways you can build into this gun. You can either go crit rate and crit damage, or you can go down the path of weapon damage and weak spot damage. So I wanted to take you through two distinct builds and show you where they perform well. I also want to obviously cover the armor pieces you want to equip, and also go through each armor slot, like which is the best mod to put on per slot depending on which build you are going for. And like my previous videos, I do try to give you like the best mathematical option. So rather than just prescribe this is the best build based on like the mods I have, is try to give you some explanation to how the damage actually stacks and which one mathematically you should go for when making your own build. So you can look through your mods and go, yeah, actually in this scenario, this mod is better for me. Hopefully you make some better decisions on making builds in Once Human. Like usual, there'll be chapters down below. I've seen some comments saying, why is the video so long? That's okay. Just skip to the section you need help with. I literally try to put everything on the screen. You don't even have to listen to me. You could just screenshot the build from there. Just skip to the chapter and go from there. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go through how the weapon actually functions, because unfortunately there was a patch kind of recently that just messed up the description of this completely. There are some older videos I saw that actually had the correct description. So depending on when you're watching this, the weapon feature may be correct or might be completely wrong. So starting with the very top line, trigger shrapnel after every 12 hits. This is correct. You'll see in the bottom middle of the screen we have a count. And when we get to 12, some 8, 9, 10, 11, when we get to the 12th hit, we'll trigger shrapnel. So on the 12th hit, we'll get a shrapnel proc. There's a shrapnel. So that is working. Yay. The next thing says for every 40 magazine capacity, parts hit shrapnel +1. This is also correct. So what this means is if I reload, at the moment, bottom right hand of the screen, I have 163 bullets. For every 40 bullets, I have one extra piece of shrapnel. So all you have to do here is 163 divided by 40, right? It goes in 4 times. So I'm going to get 4 extra pieces of shrapnel plus the original piece. So I'll have 5 total pieces of shrapnel with 163 bullets in the magazine. So we'll get to 12, proc on 12, right? And if you slow that down, you'll see there's 5 shrapnel pieces. Cool. That also works correctly. Myelin from the future here. I just caught this in editing, and what I forgot to say was you are limited with how many shrapnel pieces the gun can make itself. And that limit is 5 shrapnel pieces. So the example I just gave, and that is equivalent to 160 bullets in the magazine. So once you reach 160 bullets in the magazine, you'll produce 5 shrapnel pieces from the gun itself, and it will not go any higher than that. Now, you can use unique armor pieces to increase the shrapnel, but the gun's like weapon feature gets capped at 160 bullets, which is equivalent to 5 shrapnel pieces. Now, the tricky part is the shrapnel damage bonuses, which I'm about to teach you about, does increase beyond 160. So you do get some benefits from going beyond 160 in the magazine. You just don't get any more shrapnel pieces from going beyond 160. So just keep in your mind, 160 is the bare minimum goal for any of your builds. Okay, back to the video. Now it's the next line that's completely and utterly balked. And right now it says, for every 100 magazine capacity over 4, shrapnel damage plus 15%, magazine capacity plus 8%. Whatever's happened when they did the update, all these numbers switched around. They're all in the wrong spot. So what it should read is, let's head over here. And this took me a while to work out. I had to end up watching an old video and I saw the description had changed. So what it really means is for every 15, so it takes out 5 there. For every 15 bullets over 100, it gets shrapnel damage plus 8%. You can see, right, all the numbers have been switched, and the magazine capacity is plus 40. Okay, so I've tested that. That's how it works. For every 15 bullets over 100, you get an additional shrapnel damage of 8%. Now this is interesting, this specific shrapnel damaging, because it actually stacks multiplicatively with some of the other mods. So it's like its own bucket of shrapnel damage stacking, which is really nice. So in this example, right, if I have 160 bullets in the magazine, yeah, 163, it would be, right, so we do 163 minus 100, okay, just so everyone follows along. We're 63 bullets over, and for every lot of 15 is 8%. So divide by 15. So we're 4 lots of 15 over 100. So it's just 4 times 8. So our shrapnel gets a 32% shrapnel damage buff for having 162 bullets in the magazine, for being 62 bullets over 100. Cool. So interestingly, with this weapon, it prioritizes you and rewards you getting mag capacity on some of your mods, which is pretty nice, because you can't quite see because my camera's covering this up. This has mag capacity on it. I'm going to go through all these mods in a second. Ignore this for the moment. These are just what I had on. Cool. So that is how the weapon works. And the other thing to know is with shrapnel, it takes, let me just show you. It takes 50% of, this is also a bit weird. It says deals 50% attack as weapon damage. It takes 50% of this damage number here, which is important for some of this build, and applies it randomly to other parts. So if you are shooting the body, some of the shrapnel can go to the head, and on this specific enemy, there's also another hit zone down here. So if you're shooting the middle of the body, you can actually get some shrapnel down here, and you can get some shrapnel up here. Oppositely, if you're shooting the head, you can then get shrapnel spawning here and here. So all the testing has been done with the dummy, but obviously some things in the game are not like humanoids, and they have more weak spots or less weak spots, or more body parts for actual things to hit. So it does change a little bit. What you do need to know is that shrapnel can hit a weak spot like that. Shrapnel can also crit, so that's a crit there over a weak spot, and shrapnel can crit over a body as well. So it does scale with your weak spot damage, with your crit damage. Like if you hit a weak spot, it's going to get crit damage bonus. Sorry, if you hit a crit, it's going to get crit damage bonus. If you hit a weak spot, it's going to get weak spot damage bonus. It also scales with your weapon damage, just like in general, it will get your weapon damage bonuses. It gets your enemy type bonuses, so damage against common enemies, damage against elites. It gets all those bonuses too. It gets vulnerability bonuses, so if you're marking a target with bullseye, like the crossbow, and you get vulnerability plus 8%, it also gets vulnerability on shrapnel too. So it scales with lots of different aspects of the game. And finally, there are some mods that imply that shrapnel has its own crit rate. We don't quite know the formula for that. Only thing that we can kind of show is that as your standard crit rate increases, your shrapnel crit rate chances increases too. So that's what I've included in like my math formulas, is like as crit rate goes up, the shrapnel crit rate also improves with it. Okay, let's quickly talk about what unique you should run with this shrapnel build: the cage helmet versus the gas tight helmet versus the beret. In this build, cage helmet becomes king, and I'll show you why. So the cage helmet says shrapnel trigger count +1. And what this technically means is that whatever's triggering shrapnel, make it happen again. So for this, on the 12th hit, shrapnel triggers. And for conflicting memories, one trigger causes, for the amount of ammo I have, causes 5 bits of shrapnel, right? Remember that for every 40 magazine capacity, parts hit plus 1. So for this, I've got 160 bullets. 40 goes into 160 at least 4 times. So that's 4 bits of shrapnel plus 1 extra, because that's just like the freebie you get. So this is going to trigger 5 pieces of shrapnel. And what this is going to do is make it happen a second time. So this is going to trigger 10 pieces of shrapnel on the 12th hit. So I'm on 11 hits, 12th hit, right? Look how much shrapnel you get. So it basically doubles how much shrapnel you're creating, because it procs it twice. So the beret for this is only adding, it just says shrapnel hit +1. It only adds an additional piece of shrapnel. And the gas-tied helmet is just doing one piece of shrapnel at 120% damage, which is not going to outperform the cage helmet. Right, you just do one bit of damage. Cool. So the cage helmet is king for this one, which is really nice because it wasn't as useful before. So you can now run the cage helmet when you're running the MG4 Conflicting Memories. Cool. And just remember, you want to prioritize having the large LMG drum mag too, because this gives you +20 in the magazine. Myelin from the future here. I wanted to add an additional section about calibrations. Originally, this video only focused on mods because it took so long for me to work all that out. But I know a lot of people are interested in calibrations because they are an absolute pain to get. And I found some extra time. So let's quickly talk about calibrations. I compared 3 different styles of calibrations. The overflow style, the assault style, and also I plugged into my spreadsheet the rapid shot style. That's the wrong one. It's down here somewhere. Rapid shot. So that is fire rate +10%, accuracy -50, and then fire rate +10% after continuously firing for 2 seconds. So which one should you prioritize? Overflow, assault style, or rapid shot? So overflow, this is a purple one, by the way, and I did do the calculations for a gold one. So this reads, when reloading, load extra ammo equal to 50% of the shots fired within 20 seconds from the last magazine. Extra ammo gains attack +10% on a gold, and it can't exceed 100% of the magazine. Essentially, within the last 20 seconds is going to always be your entire magazine, because that is a hell of a long time to be shooting continuously for. So you get essentially 50% of your entire magazine, and it has attack +10%. Now, there's a bunch of things that it's going on with this. The attack +10% says the extra ammo gets the attack +10%, but it does buff your shrapnel too, which is huge. However, there's a bunch of things that this doesn't do that you kind of expect it should. The bump in your magazine capacity does not increase your shrapnel count. So if you weren't at 160, right, to get the max of 5 shrapnel pieces, this actually doesn't increase it. Even if it pushes you over 160 bullets in the magazine, you won't get extra shrapnel pieces. So it just doesn't work with that weapon feature. And it also doesn't increase your shrapnel damage bonus from the magazine as well. So, this is going to bump you up, 160 or 180, whatever, how many bullets you get. You don't get any of the shrapnel damage bonuses. You don't get any of the additional shrapnel pieces from it. It just doesn't work, which is a huge shame because this on paper kind of looks pretty good. Right. The next thing to talk about is, and I'll tell you which is best at the end, assault style. Now, I was interested in this because this has an attack +25%, which is huge, and all your shrapnel pieces benefit from that. So I was like, man, that could be worth it. The magazine capacity is -30%, which is also huge, and you have to offset that with something like mag expansion. So I was really interested in, if we offset that -30% with 30% from mag expansion, like, is it worth running assault, essentially? And you do have to have a bunch of magazine capacity to reach at least 160. And I worked that out to be about 13%. So if you can get 13% magazine capacity on your other mods, and you have at least the large magazine here, and you have at least one lone wolf mask giving you also magazine capacity, you can reach the 160 running assault style. And I'll see if that ends up being better. Cool. I guess we'll talk about that now, because the other one is just your rapid shot, which is your increase in fire rate. Okay, you get like a bunch of increase in fire rate. And what I did compare is I compared rapid shot to overflow style first. Rapid shot was better. You're just putting out ammo way quicker. You're proccing shrapnel way quicker. Rapid shot is better than overflow style. Overflow is suffering from not getting the benefits of the increased magazine size, essentially. And technically, if you shoot longer than 8 seconds continuously, overflow could start overtaking it during the reload phase of your first gun. But 8 seconds is like quite a large period of time to be doing like burst damage. Your rapid shot is better burst damage. Cool. Then I put into a build the assault style with our offset of mag expansion, and then I put in a rapid shot with your fire rate, and I swapped out mag expansion for momentum up, which gives you more fire rate and weapon damage. And rapid shot came out on top again, quite significantly, by like 12%. So even once you like adjust for fire rate, rapid shot was like 12% better, and it was like significantly finishing the magazine quicker than the other option. It was like 4 seconds quicker as well. So rapid shot is your way to go calibration style. I will talk about whether you should run crit rate or weak spot damage when we get to the actual builds themselves. Okay, hopefully that gives you an idea of what you should chase for the calibrations. Okay, let's talk about the weapon mods. We have a Shrapnel Smash, which says triggering shrapnel grants shrapnel crit rate plus 1% for 2 seconds. Effect can stack up to 20 times. So technically a 20% increase on your crit rate for shrapnel specifically. And this is the kind of a weird one. It says triggering shrapnel. So unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it is per piece of shrapnel. So remember, we trigger shrapnel on every 12th hit, and we make 10 pieces, well, depending on how much ammo you have in your magazine. Let's say you make 10 pieces of shrapnel. Unfortunately, I believe that's only a 1% increase for 2 seconds rather than 10%. It's just on the trigger, not each individual shrapnel piece. Also, the other confusing thing about this is I don't really know what the shrapnel crit rate uses as its calculation. So I did just manually compare this. I did a bunch of dummy comparisons with basically our shatter them all, and it was consistently less damage. So this one is out for me. That's a no. Shrapnel Souvenir, which is basically our mod that we've used in previous builds to never have to reload. It's our like infinite ammo build. And it says when shrapnel hits a weak spot, automatically refill 1 bullet. The primary reason, or there's a couple reasons why you would want to use a non-reload build. The first and obvious is so you can do damage when you would typically be reloading. Now this, in my opinion, doesn't work so well with an LMG that has a huge magazine capacity. It works really well with something like Jaws, which is a pistol with unstable bomber, and it doesn't have many bullets in the magazine, so you can quickly empty the magazine and then have to be reloading. And if you have something that refills it, you're actually doing damage during that time. In my experience, when using the LMG, I'm having to reposition before reloads. So I used it throughout the new raid, and I was finding I wasn't completely emptying the magazine. I was having to reposition, and anytime you reposition, that's a potential to reload. So you're not doing continuous damage. So that's one of the reasons I didn't favor Shrapnel Souvenir, is I was like, the magazine capacity was so large, I was repositioning before needing to reload anyway, so I wasn't going to get that advantage. There is a second reason you might want to use Shrapnel Souvenir, and that is primarily for mods like Deadshot, which says each crit hit by non-melee weapons grants 5% crit damage up to 45%. The effect is removed upon the next reload. So i.e. you keep a 45% buff on your crit damage because you're not having to reload if you can achieve that. The thing is with this, because you only get shrapnel spawning on every 12th hit, so you got to spend 12 bullets. You can get a lot of shrapnel proccing, but they're not all going to hit weak spots. You can put in a, I think it's in the mask mods. Yeah, shrapnel weak spot hit rate plus 100% to increase the chances of the shrapnel hitting the weak spot. But even if you do that, you still have to reload at some point. So I do not think it's worth it for Shrapnel Souvenir. If you have a correction, please let me know. There's been plenty of times I've been wrong in these videos, but I can't see the use case for Shrapnel Souvenir, which then leaves us with one viable option, which is shatter them all. It's been renamed since some of my previous shrapnel videos, and that is the more parts shrapnel hits, the higher the shrapnel damage. Each part plus 15% up to 45%. Cool, really cool things about this one is it stacks multiplicatively with our other shrapnel damage for whatever reason, which is nice. So the shrapnel damage bonus we get from the weapon itself, this shrapnel damage bonus in this line here, it stacks multiplicatively with that, which is awesome. And the other thing is, if you have a large, actually you can have either magazine. You have any of the magazine upgrades on the LMG and a single piece of Lone Wolf mask, you will max out this to 45%. You'll have enough shrapnel to get the max of 45%. Cool. So my recommendation for weapon mods is shatter them all. Okay, let's talk about the helmet mods. Momentum Up was the best all-round performing helmet mod. The fire rate plus 10% for the first 50% of the magazine, and then weapon damage, it's actually 25%, not 30, for the next 50% of the magazine. Faithful Strike is obviously very competitive for body shots. Momentum Up was only around 3% better if you're just looking at the mods themselves. However, if you plug these into an endgame build, Faithful Strike is slightly better than Momentum Up on body shots only. Of course, though, Faithful Strike does not do well when it comes to weak spot damage because it can't deal weak spot damage, so you lose all of those bonuses. But endgame build, if there's a boss with no weak spot, you can run Faithful Strike. Otherwise, Momentum Up is a really good choice. The other good thing is mag expansion actually performs really well. You get the magazine capacity, which buffs your shrapnel damage. And the difference between mag expansion and Momentum Up for body shots was like 2%. Momentum Up was only 2% better, and that is all including like fire rate and shooting for the same length of time. So I didn't let mag expansion like shoot all of its 180 rounds and Momentum Up only shoot 140 rounds. I did it for that specific time period. And so if you are desperate and you don't have a good Momentum Up or you don't have a Faithful Strike, you can actually run mag expansion, and it does pretty well. When it comes to weak spot damage, Momentum Up was actually even better than Precise Strike, so still a better option to run Momentum Up overall. Precise Strike is good for weak spot, but as soon as you start missing a weak spot, Momentum Up is going to outperform, so I would still run Momentum Up in a weak spot build. And mag expansion also, once again, performed okay. It was 5.5%. Momentum Up was 5.5% better than mag expansion. So if you are desperate, you can chuck in mag expansion, but my recommendation is Momentum Up. Okay, let's talk about mask mods, starting with explosive shrapnel, which says the 20th shrapnel is explosive and deals 300% damage as a critical. This is doo-doo because it doesn't actually mean the 20th piece of shrapnel. It means the 20th trigger. Unfortunately, it does not count all the shrapnel that you spawn every trigger. So, for example, when we are shooting this, right, and we get all that shrapnel, that counts as 1. Even if we spawn 10 pieces of shrapnel, that counts as 1. I honestly don't think that's how it should function, but it is how it functions right now. So you actually need to trigger it 20 times before you even get that 300% damage. So it's no good. The second one is a shrapnel carnage, and this is a shrapnel weak spot hit rate plus 100%, and then shrapnel weak spot damage plus 25%. It means you do need to shoot the body so the shrapnel goes to a weak spot, or you need to shoot a non-weak spot so shrapnel triggers on a weak spot to get it. So I did plug this into calculations. I'll tell you how it went. But our highest damage was actually light cannon. And this says no super armor inside Fortress Warfare. And while in Fortress Warfare, attack plus 15%. So there's a couple things to note with this. We are using the long axe to trigger Fortress Warfare. If you haven't seen some of my previous videos, there has been some patches since. You do have to complete the entire swing, hit the ground, and then you can change your weapon, and then you can start DPS. Now, the reason why this is viable at the moment is there is a override cradle. I can't go into his because I'm in Eternal Land at the moment. That essentially spawns a second Fortress Warfare. If you're playing by yourself, it spawns on you. So you get 10 seconds of Fortress Warfare. If you're playing with friends, it can spawn on them. So you pretty much have to be in the same spot for it to get like 10 seconds of Fortress Warfare. And this is very comparable to having to use a crossbow for marked targets. So you get 10 seconds of uptime with Fortress Warfare. And if we compare that to something like using the recurve crossbow with Bullseye, Bullseye is active for 12 seconds. So technically you get vulnerability for a little bit longer, 2 seconds longer. After this scenario is finished, so if you're watching this in the far future and we no longer have essentially double stacks of Fortress Warfare, I do think your crit rate and crit damage build is going to be better. We are going to talk about the whole endgame build a little bit later on, but just things for the moment. So, oopsies. Okay. So light cannon is really, really good, especially right now when you get double Fortress Warfare. The attack plus 15% modifies this damage number here, which is huge because that's the number shrapnel uses in its damage calculations. So you get 15% onto your damage. And you also get 20% weapon damage just because of Fortress Warfare. Very, very nice. Okay. And then, so that's what I would recommend for your weapon damage build is a light cannon using the long axe. And then for your crit damage build, to targeted strike, a staple, hitting marked targets, crit rate plus 10%, crit damage plus 25%. You of course get, when you mark a target, you get vulnerability, which stacks with your shrapnel damage. You get plus 8% vulnerability. If you use the crossbow, you actually get a crit rate of 15% as well. Otherwise, you can use something like the bingo. It's my personal favorite. You just switch to it and your first shot will mark a target. You do that, you switch back and you start DPS. You don't get the 15% like you get with the crossbow. However, you still get the crit rate 10% and the crit damage plus 25% for hitting marked targets. Stay tuned for the endgame build and I'll run you through crossbow versus non-crossbow versus weapon damage build. But they're my two recommendations for mass mods. Light cannon absolutely cracked this scenario, or targeted strike if you're going for a crit damage build. I forgot to tell you the percentages. If you use a light cannon instead of shrapnel carnage, you do a whopping like 30% more damage on the body and like 84% more damage on the weak spot. So yeah, shrapnel carnage is no good. And if you use light cannon over targeted strike, just the mods, not the end game build, just the mods, you do like 10% more body damage and you do like 12% more weak spot damage. Targeted strike will come up a little bit more in the end game build, but there's just the damage percentages. Okay, let's talk about the top mods. Okay, so if you are running a crit damage build, you want to look for this orange box here. So you can either run crit damage enhancement or you can run munitions amplifier. They both do very similar amounts of damage in an end game build. The difference is only like 1.5%. Munitions did 1.5% more damage than crit for body, around body and weak spot. So pretty much base your decision on what the secondary attributes are. If you're doing a crit damage build, you can go munitions or you can go crit damage and then make your decision based on the secondary attributes. If you're doing a weapon damage build, which is the green, you want to run munitions, which is just going to give you a flat weapon damage plus 9%. The reason why this is so good is because your shrapnel benefits from all these buffs. So it's very, very potent. And this even outperforms your weak spot damage, so don't even worry about that. Even when you're shooting a weak spot, munitions outperforms weak spot damage bonus in an endgame build. Okay, similar story with the gloves. If you just take the mods by themselves, munitions amplifier outperforms everything, just with the weapon damage plus 15%. If you plug them into an endgame build with endgame stats, crit amplifier outperforms munitions in an endgame crit build. So if you are running a crit build, which is my orange square, you want to run crit amplifier. And it wasn't a huge amount more. It did around 3 to 4% more damage than munitions in an endgame build for crit. So if you don't have a well-rolled crit amplifier, prioritize getting a good munitions amplifier instead. If you are running a weapons build, then definitely munitions amplifier is the way to go. Okay, let's talk about the bottoms. If you're running a crit build, which is my orange box, you can either run the dead shot or bullet siphon. Dead shot's going to increase your crit damage slowly up to 45%, and bullet siphon's going to slowly increase your weapon damage by 20%. And yes, I did math all this out, changing my crit rate, crit damage every time with dead shot, and then also changing my weapon damage every time with bullet siphon. They are incredibly close for an endgame crit build. It's basically 1% difference for both body shots and weak spots. So pick whichever one you have better mods for, dead shot or bullet siphon. They're incredibly close. If you are running a weapon damage build, which is my green highlight, you of course want to go for bullet siphon. Okay, let's talk about the boots. Your best in slot is covered advance. After not taking damage for 4 seconds, you're going to get 20% melee weapon and status damage. Only thing we're benefiting from there is the weapon damage for which is given at 20%, which is great for shrapnel. Slow and steady does give the same effect. You get weapon damage plus 10%, but when your HP is above 90, you get an additional 10%, bringing you to a total of also 20% weapon damage. I typically prefer covered advance, but if you're keeping your health up and you may be doing easier content, your health's not dipping, you can use slow and steady. I typically prefer slow and steady for like frost builds where I got a lot of health regen, and I like it that way. Just a note for covered advance, as long as you don't take damage for 4 seconds, you get that entire buff for 30 seconds. It doesn't matter if you take damage during that 30 seconds, you still get the buff. And then when that finishes, as long as you don't take damage for 4 seconds, then you get the buff again. Cool. If you are just running silos and you want to deal with like ad clear, you could also run Ruthless Reaper. It's not going to increase your overall damage, but it's just going to mean you're never going to have to reload because you get, after 2 kills, refill 100% of your magazine from your reserves. So you can take out small enemies and not have to reload. Okay, we can now apply all of that knowledge into 3 distinct endgame builds. I'm going to compare these builds using different scenarios. The first scenario is a boss with no weak spot. So build number 1 is our weapon damage build, and unfortunately, we have to build into weak spot as well. So it's weapon damage and weak spot, primarily because our mods have 3 main attributes, either crit damage, weak spot damage, or status damage. And if we're moving away from crit, this build doesn't do status, only leaves us with precision. There are some other mods like from Prime Wars, so last scenario, and the hard mode server also has different mods where you can get like different versions of these, but if we're just looking at the main ones, we have to build into weak spot, unfortunately. You can get no suffix mods, and you can get weapon damage as the primary attribute on that, but they are harder to come by as well. So unfortunately, we're going to take a hit on this. We have to build into weapon and weak spot. The other thing to note, just in case you've skipped to this part of the video, is we are using light cannon, and we are triggering Fortress Warfare using the axe, and we are using the Cradle Override to double the time of Fortress Warfare. Cool. The armor we have on is the Cage Helmet. We have 3 Bastille and 2 Stormweaver. The Stormweaver is really interesting because it actually gives us a magazine capacity of 15%. When you combine that with a large mag in your accessories for your MG4, it actually puts you into the next bracket of shrapnel damage. I did test Stormweaver versus Renegade versus Savior, and 2 pieces of Stormweaver was the better option. Once again, unfortunately, we're going to have to build into weak spot for a calibration. So I've got double weak spot calibrations. And like I said before, each one of our mods is a weak spot mod. So they're all precision mods. Cool. Our crit build, because we're saying there's no weak spot, we're using Faithful Strike. We are also marking with the bingo because we're saying there's no weak spot. So there's no weak spot to hit. So we are going to be marking targets with bingo because you can just shoot them anywhere and that will mark the target. We're using the Cage Helmet. We're using 4 Lone Wolf, 1 Bastille, a double crit rate calibration, and all of our mods are going to be crit damage mods. So they're all going to be the violent mods. If you plug this into the spreadsheet with a boss with no weak spot, of course, our crit build does very well. It outperforms our weapon damage and weak spot build by 28%. No surprises there, but here is the surprise. If you change the scenario from no weak spot to something like a hard to hit weak spot, i.e., it's hard enough that you don't want to use a crossbow because it's either taking too long to line up a weak spot hit with the crossbow, so you're using bingo, and also you're kind of saying that it's difficult to hit the weak spot too. Now, why would that be something we want to consider? Well, our shrapnel can hit weak spots, and our shrapnel does benefit from weak spot damage. So in the scenario where a weak spot is available, but you are still shooting the body to primarily do your damage because it's hard to hit the weak spot, the difference now between these two is like only 3%. And that's because all of this shrapnel damage is getting weapon damage buff and it's getting weak spot damage buff. And even though you can't hit the weak spot, this shrapnel is triggering on a weak spot and drops that down a lot. So if you do come across a boss and it's difficult to hit the weak spot, but not impossible, weapon damage and weak spot build actually performs pretty well. Okay, so our next example is a boss with a very easily hit weak spot. Our weapon damage and weak spot build is exactly the same. However, our crit build is slightly different. We're swapping out Fateful Strike for Momentum Up. And now, because we're saying the weak spot's pretty easy to hit, we're actually getting rid of bingo and we're using the crossbow to mark the target. The crossbow is going to give us an extra 15% crit rate. Now, if we then shoot the weak spot and we compare weak spot damage from our weapon damage build compared with our crit build, our weapon and weak spot damage build does more damage shooting the weak spot. It actually does 16% more damage than our endgame crit build. Now, just as a potential another scenario, let's say you can hit the weak spots, all right? So it's easy to hit it with a crossbow. Let's say the enemy moves and then you start doing mainly body damage as your primary damage type. Crit build then outperforms our weapon weak spot build and is actually around 16% as well. So then you get increased damage on your crit build. But overall, if an enemy or a boss has an easy to hit weak spot, our weapon damage weak spot build is very, very competitive and outperforms the endgame crit build. If there is no weak spots, then you do really have to build into crit. And this is kind of the power of crit in this game. You can just make it work regardless of the boss type. And there you have it. You can make a very competitive weak spot and weapon damage build with the new MG4. That is a shrapnel build. I guess your next question is it better than the last Valor? I don't know yet. It takes so long to get through all this stuff that I'm kind of now interested. Is it better than last Valor? What's the best? Now that I know the best build for the MG4, can I then compare it to the best build for the last Valor and see which one is better? I'm not too sure. If you want to know the answer to that, let me know down below and I'll start looking into it. There are a bunch of other stuff on my list to do, like just all the new weapons from this season that I kind of want to get through as well. So let me know what you prefer and I'll see you next time. Like and comment would be greatly appreciated. Bye-bye.